It happened here. A body arrived in the Halifax harbour in a rum barrel. But it wasn't murder. It was Major General Robert Ross, a decorated British officer.
Ross was tossed into a barrel of Jamaican rum, where he was preserved until he was brought here to Halifax.
The year is 1812, and the United States and Britain are at war.
As a major port city, Halifax was essential for British military action in North America.
Here at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, Mike Audie is working on a model of the harbour, how it would have looked then, with fully rigged ships and people in 1/300th scale. Defences would have been at the mouth of the harbour, closer to where the present-day city is.
In 1814, there would have been fortifications here at the Citadel.
There also would have been defences over on George's Island, McNabb's Island, and what is now Point Pleasant Park. To the Nova Scotia Archives!
Meanwhile, in the United States, our Major General, Robert Ross, was a decorated soldier, having fought at the Battle of Fort McHenry in Baltimore, which inspired the famous poem Star Spangled Banner.
You know the part where it goes, and the rockets red clad that were burning in air. Well, those were the Congreve rockets, designed in 1804 by Sir William Congreve. The Americans hadn't seen anything like this before. They were kind of like grenades, only way more dangerous.
So at this point, Ross was in charge of the British Army in that region. So he decided, let's burn all of the public buildings in Washington, one of those buildings being the White House. And there are some people who think that this was retaliation for the sacking of York, which you'll know as Toronto. Here are the engravings for how they depicted it at the time. As for General Robert Ross, he was off to another battle, the Battle of North Point, but on his way he was shot in the chest and succumbed to his injuries.
This was a respected general. They couldn't just leave him on foreign fields, so they did what they had to do. They stuffed his body in a rum barrel.
Major General Robert Ross was placed inside a barrel of Jamaican rum, which was then placed aboard the HMS Torrent. Now that was diverted down to New Orleans, where he found himself aboard the HMS Royal Oak. That's how he got here to Halifax. But what we want to know is, could an average person today fit inside a barrel of Jamaican rum? It was common practice to preserve a dead body in rum.
And actually the Navy is quite fond of their rum. Until the 1970s, the Canadian Navy gave out rum rations, or tods of rum. And at one time, the officers' mess was quite literally that, a drunken mess where drunks were put to stay out of sight.
Now, sailors have always been very fond of their liquor, and it would have been out of the ordinary for them to steal some from a cask, even if it contained a dead body. And one of the most infamous examples of that happening was that of Horatio Nelson, a famous British war hero. When he arrived back in England, the cask was said to be found almost empty, which is why in the Navy for many years getting your ration of rum was called tapping the Admiral.
At Nova Scotia Archives and Records Management, we searched for an account of Robert Ross's arrival at the Halifax dockyards. It feels so space age for him.
Wife of Sir John Sherbrooke, who was Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia at the time, recorded that the fleet bearing Ross's body arrived on Wednesday, the 28th of September, with the funeral occurring the next day at around 3 p.m. And she says here that the coffin was landed at the King's Wharf, minute guns being fired from the ships during the time it was waterborne and when it landed. Minute guns were fired from the forts till it reached the burial ground. There was an amazing crowd which prevented my seeing much of the processions. Guns were fired from over the grave, and the funeral was over at around 4:30.
And this is where he lies, unceremoniously transported but more ceremoniously buried here.
A once well-recognized historic figure whose image still lies in the White House he tried to burn down. Now Robert Ross is in downtown Halifax.
And that's the man who arrived in the rum cask. A rum toast to Major General Robert Ross, the man who tried to burn down the White House and was pickled in rum. Here on the 29th of September 1814 was committed to the earth the body of Major General Robert Ross, who,
after having distinguished himself in all ranks as an officer in Egypt, Italy, Portugal, Spain, France, and America, was killed at the commencement of an action which terminated in the defeat and rout
of the troops of the United States near Baltimore on the 12th of September 1814.